couple of words about this anthem.
Paul, step up to the microphone.
A couple of words about this anthem. When my wife Carol passed in 2017, we were both fond of this particular composer, Pepper Choplin. And just out of a lark, I called him on the phone, and he answered on the second ring. Proceeded to talk with him for about a half an hour. I mean, here's a busy guy. And I talked with him about a half an hour about how much Carol loved quilting and how much Carol loved the Lord, how much Carol loved her family, her grandchildren, and was a great participant in churches all her life as an organist and as a choir member. Long story short, this wonderful church, Westerly Central Baptist Church, commissioned Pepper Choplin to write this anthem that we're going to share with you this morning.
As a tapestry's woven, thread by thread, patiently working, the needle is led. So deeds of kindness and words that are said from a tapestry.
As a tapestry's woven thread by thread, patiently working the needle is led. So deeds of kindness and words that are said form a tapestry of love. You know, many of us have been deeply influenced by the women in our lives, whether they be our grandmothers, our mothers, maternal or otherwise, by the women that we've married and become mothers to our children. And so I want to just begin by saying again, and I can't say it enough, Happy Mother's Day to all the moms and mother figures who are here. Although we should be doing that every single day. I want to thank all those women who have had a tremendous impact on our lives. You see, these women, who sometimes we take for granted, are incredible, influential teachers to the children of generations past and generations to come. I can't tell you how many times I think back to the things that my mother said. At times I didn't think much of it, especially the teenage years. It seems like sometimes we go through this fog and nothing anybody tells us has any value until later on. We begin to think about it. I'll never forget the day that I came home from school with the news that I had flunked out of college. That long drive from Yukon back to Colchester, knowing that I had to face my mother and my father and the disappointment. And you know what my mother said? She said that she had been worried about me because she had noticed that I had stopped setting goals and I just seemed to be drifting along. And then she said something like this, and I can't remember the exact words, but this is how I heard it. She said, "Cal, this isn't the end of the world. You can start over, and God will make a way." And those words impacted me deeply because I had thought that all my dreams, all my hopes had disappeared, and yet she planted that seed within me. And that seed was born out of her faith. I have the great joy. This was my stepmother, but I call her my mother because she was there and had been there for all these years. We were baptized on the same day. And so her faith was growing, and she had more faith in me than I had in myself at that point in time. You know, my parents surprised me time and again. When I thought they were going to yell and scream, they'd say something to encourage me and give me a new purpose and a new direction. I could give you multiple examples of this, and you've heard some of them if you've been worshiping with us over time. More than anything else, they modeled what I believe is the heart of God because they sacrificed for my brothers and I. This morning I want to talk about another mother. You heard Pastor Enrique talk about this passage from the Gospel of Matthew, and this mother's name, we believe, is Salome. She is only mentioned a few times in the Scriptures. She was one of the women who stood at the cross with Mary, the mother of Jesus, as he suffered and died. She was also one of those women, according to one of the accounts of the resurrection, who went to the tomb with the other Mary to anoint the body of Jesus. She was a faithful disciple, a lover of Jesus. But it is in this passage from Matthew that she has received the most pushback and criticism for her actions. Actually, I had a Jewish rabbi friend of mine who said she was a typical Jewish mother. She was looking out for her boys. She's depicted as being pushy, a demanding mother who's asking Jesus for something that she has no right to request. And many preachers have used her as an example of what not to do. But I want to give you a little different take on that passage because I think Salome may have been simply doing what mothers do. She loved her sons, James and John, and she wanted what was best for them. Motherhood, I believe, is one of the highest callings. It's one of the most difficult callings. I'll never forget, and some of you have heard me share this story before. I got a call from a woman, 89 years old, and she was in distress, and she said, "Can you come and visit?" And I went and visited, and as we talked, she was crying, and she was saying, "My daughter, I'm so worried about her. She's drinking again, and I'm so afraid she's going to lose her job." And I'm sitting there, my heart is aching, and I'm thinking, and I'm picturing, this woman who is struggling with alcoholism, and then she says this. She says, she's 64 and a half. She's just got to go 6 more months before she can retire. And here I am as a 27-year-old pastor, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, 89 years old, and she's still worried about her daughter? The truth is, our daughter Rebecca had just been born, and we were just getting into what it meant to be a parent. The truth is, a mother's heart doesn't just end at age 16 or 21 or when they get married. A mother loves their daughter forever. I don't know how many of you know this, but Phil and I and Pastor Dave met with Steve Burnside about a month ago or so, and we were talking, we prayed with him because he's got a bad back, but he shared with us at that time that he and Katie were moving to Texas. And I said, I know why, a mother's heart, because their daughter Emma is down in Texas. You see, being a mother, being a parent is not easy, because once you receive that gift of parenthood, you carry that with you your whole life. You love your children. You want what is best for them. God has given the women in our lives a charge to raise godly children and to teach them in the way that they should go. Sam Haskell, maybe you've heard the name, the former executive director of the Miss America program, wrote a book titled Promises I Made My Mother. In it, he asked, what would my mother say? He was a grown man. He had been the executive in another company, as well as being a part of the Miss America program. And he'd say, whenever I have a decision to make, I would say, what would my mother say? How would she want me to handle this situation? How can I make this tough decision and stay true to myself? And in the book, he said he still asked himself these questions every single day. And when he was young, his devoted mother Mary instilled in her son the values of character, faith, and honor. Not by telling him what he should do, but by setting an example and asking him to promise to live his life according to the lessons he saw in her. Salome was doing what any mother would do. The fact that she went to Jesus with her request shows that she understood who he was. She was a disciple. Oh, yeah, she's not in the list of the 12, but these women who followed around truly were learning and growing in their faith by being with Jesus and the men he called to be disciples. So she was a disciple. And she took him seriously when he said, ask anything, and it will be given to you. She took him at his word. And so there she was thinking about her children, her boys, and she wanted what was best for him. Where she was mistaken was in her thinking that Jesus had come to set up an earthly kingdom. Being a fisherman's hard work, isn't it, Paul? Go out with Paul one day fishing, and you will see. And in those days there was the nets over the side and hauling in the fish, and then there was so much, it was all manual labor. And she thought about our boys, and she thought, wouldn't it be nice? The example she had was of the Roman Empire, where those men who sat in authority were able to live a glorious life. And so she said to Jesus, can you do me a favor? My boys have been good to you. They've been following you. They're smart. They're strong. Why not give them a good position so they can have life a little better? They will serve you well. But you see, Jesus wasn't about setting up a kingdom on earth here in that way. She wasn't thinking about the spiritual heavenly realm that he was establishing for all who would believe. And the truth is that we often do the same thing that Salome did. We go to Jesus with our request, but what she learned was that Jesus had a plan. And he'd already put in motion the things that are not only in our best interest because he loves us, but are also part and parcel of God's will for the world. You see, I think Jesus already knew the role that James and John would play in his ministry. He'd set that role for them. God had provided them even before they were born. We read in the Old Testament that God knows the plans He has for us. And that's what she learned that day. When Jesus says you don't know what you're asking, He was in effect telling her and her boys that to serve God often means great sacrifice. After all, Jesus was just telling the disciples, you look at the paragraph just before this passage, and He's saying the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn Him to death and will hand Him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. This was the third time that Jesus had told the disciples this. If they got it wrong the first time, thought they misunderstood, He told them again. And then a third time. Someone once said that sometimes you have to hear something 7 times before you believe it. Jesus was the Son of God. He only needed to say it 3 times. That's what it means to follow Jesus at times. And again, He was sharing this. When He says, can you drink this cup? As He looks at her and her sons, He was telling them that there's a high price to pay for the devotion to God. And the truth is, many of us know that. Oh, we may not be crucified, but we might be ostracized. We might be marginalized. Or you may live in a place in the world that is very different from here, where you could be imprisoned or put to death for your faith. But it's a choice that we all have to make for ourselves. Will we follow Jesus? Will we be faithful to Jesus? Or will we go another way? No one, not even our mother, can make that choice for us. And James and John learned that firsthand. So I want to just give you a few lessons that we can learn from Salome and from all godly mothers. First, our mothers will often point us in the right direction. Listen to your mother. Notice that Matthew tells us that Salome didn't go on her own to Jesus. She brought her boys with her. She was teaching them that if they wanted something, if they needed something, they needed to go to the one who could provide for them. They needed to go to the source. And Scripture tells us that we can bring all of our needs to Jesus and He will hear our prayers. You know, too many people do a lot of wishing and hoping. Things are troubled, things are going wrong, and we just say, oh God, I hope, I hope, I hope, I hope. I think Pastor Enrique preached a sermon about hoping, wishing. We never take that bold step of going to Jesus with our requests. If it's important, take it to Jesus. And she wanted what was best for her boys, and so instead of just hoping and waiting, and she went to Jesus and said, Lord, I love my boys, and I want the best for them, and I want you to take care of them, and this is how I see it. Put one on your right, one on your left, and they'll do okay. And Jesus said, you know, listen, I got a plan. I can't give that. Only God has that in order. But I think she knew that if she put them in Jesus' hands, that things would work out the way they were meant to be. The other disciples, of course, were offended when they saw her go directly to Jesus. But how many stories have we heard or read in the Scriptures where people in desperate need fight their way through the crowds to get to Jesus? Salome was paying attention when she saw this one or that one wrestle through the crowds to get to Jesus, where she saw the parents bringing their children to Jesus for a blessing. And what did He do? The disciples were saying, no, you can't do that. And Jesus said, let the children come to me. All those mothers who wanted Jesus' blessing. His first priority, her first priority, was to provide for her son's future. Let's face it, what mother doesn't want the best for her children? A second thing to note is that she would give her life for them. That's her calling. Salome was willing to risk her reputation by going to Jesus. She risked the scorn of the others, but she was willing to do so out of her love for her boys. In Matthew 13:34, Jesus says, "How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings." And here he's making a reference to the fact that a mother hen would be known that if she had chicks and there was some predator coming into the pen, the mother hen would gather those chicks under her wings with the thought and certain knowledge that the predator would eat her, be satiated, and leave the chicks alone. She would sacrifice herself. Jesus says this as he's ready to go into Jerusalem, trying to tell the people this is what God's love is all about. God's love, he sacrifices himself so that we might live. Salome would have given anything to see her boys through. She got it. That was her calling. In the same way, a mother will always seek out the best for her children so that they will thrive in this world, even if there is great risk to self. A third thing we note here is that Salome was setting an example for her children. There's a saying that says, there are things that are taught and things that are caught. Children will often imitate their parents. Maybe you know that country song by Rodney Atkins. It's about a boy and his dad, and of course it begins a little vulgar, you know. The boy is in the backseat of the car stops short, and the French fries go all over the place, and the little boy says a curse word. And the dad looks at him and says, "Where'd you learn to talk like that?" And the boy says, "I've been watching you, Dad. Ain't that cool? I'm your buckaroo. I want to be like you and eat all my food and grow as tall as you are. You got cowboy boots and camel pants. Yeah, we're just alike. Hey, ain't we, Dad? I want to do everything you do, so I've been watching you." You know, the truth is our children watch us. They see how we respond. They see how we live, and they learn. You know, the end of that song, he looks in, he sees his little boy sitting by his bed praying. And he says to the boy, "Son, how'd you learn to pray like that?" And he says, "Hey, I've been watching you, Dad. Ain't that cool?" You know, James and John learn faithfulness, I believe, from watching their mom. Our kids do too, and the best thing you can do for your children is to give them an example to follow. Love God. Live faithfully. Seek God's kingdom and his righteousness. You may think no one's watching, but believe me, they'll be watching you. Which leads me to my final point. When Salome came to Jesus, it's just 2 words, but it says she knelt down as if to worship him. For all she did, she showed Jesus the ultimate respect, honor, and affection. And your kids may give you a hard time about going to church. Hopefully not. They may get sidetracked in their teen years or early adulthood. But if you remain faithful and put Christ at the center of your life and worship him regularly, it will make an impression on them. So for all the chatter about Salome's big ask, I believe it was her faithfulness that shaped her boys into the men they became. In Proverbs 22, verse 6, it says, "Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." You know what happened to her boys? James. James was faithful to Christ until the end of his life. He became a martyr for the church. He never let down. Never gave up the faith. And John, not only did he give us some of the most inspiring writing in the New Testament, but later he was put into exile on the island of Patmos. And I'd say, and we'll find out one day, I'd say that they were given 2 places in glory for their service to the Lord. Ladies, you have been given the highest calling. I don't know what will become of your children or your grandchildren or some of you your great-grandchildren. But your faithfulness in the most challenging call of all will always be with them. So keep up keeping up. God bless you again, and happy Mother's Day. Amen. We're going to close today as we speak about God's faithfulness in helping us to be faithful. It's number 60 in the hymnal, Great is Thy Faithfulness.